Hello and welcome to another Head2Head, and good morning, Keith Sutherland.
Morning, Dennis. How are you this morning?
I'm well, thank you. And you're fresh from the council meeting last night. One of the bigger issues around town for the last, probably 4 or 5 years was resolved last night.
Well, it's been an ongoing thing for the last 5 years that they've at last approved the new aquatic centre and a 50-metre pool, which was quite interesting. There was quite a bit of debate. Councillor Rod Campbell suggested that we only need a 25-metre pool with all the bells and whistles. But by and large, the pool was going to go through at 50 metres. It was a pretty close vote, 5-4.
Did they say why? Because the last we had was Peter Cox and co had announced they went for a 25-metre pool, or put that out there only, a month ago.
Yep.
Was there any explanation given as to why the change?
It was basically to try and save some funds, and it was really only going to save a couple of $1 million at the end of the day, which was quite crazy. But the thing that I was really shocked about and surprised was Councillor Rod Campbell, who's an excellent councillor, suggesting that we build a 25-metre, and if we have to extend it at a later date, we do that, which to me seemed crazy. But at the end of the day, the only disappointing part from my point of view was to knock over that really good leisure centre. Sure, it's dilapidated. Councillor Chapman really got into council and said, well, you've kicked out all the tenants that they had there, it's not viable anymore. It's a great building. There's a Deb ball this Friday night, and you've spent no money on it. The maintenance has been appalling, and she really had a point about why the council had let the thing go, because they always had in them back in their mind to knock over the leisure centre. And I guess that it's really, I think, terrible to think that Don McKinnon and his crew have fought very hard to save it, because the money came from Kangaroo Flat community, but it's been knocked over.
Well, it's a rotten position to be in a way, because council caught between a rock and a hard place. If they come up with a 50-metre pool, you would expect people to be high-fiving everyone else out there in Kangaroo Flat today. But as you make the point now, and it sounds like Colleen Chapman has done that too, you've got another group of people in Kangaroo Flat who are going to be wringing their hands and saying the leisure centre we built with community money is going to be knocked over. It's sort of a no-win for them. They must be getting sick of no-win situations, council.
Well, I put on a tweet last night that why do we have to be so bloody minded that all they have to do was shift the pool to get more northerly aspect around a little bit, and you can have both. But they didn't want to, because they wanted the focal point to be the 50-metre pool and knock over the leisure centre. To me, that was just bloody minded and stupid, because we've got a great leisure centre. Sure, it needs some repair. Sure, it needs a new facade on it. But for maybe $500,000 or $1 million, you've got something terrific that the community supported. So I just don't think it was the right decision. But anyway, that was the ultimate decision, because they only had two options. One, for a 50-metre or a 25-metre. All options were to knock over the leisure centre, and I think that was stupid.
The question now, or questions now, I guess, are these, and we need to move on, I suppose, but is it going to cost too much in terms of the impact on future councils' budgets? They're going to cop this on the chin for the next however many years. The ongoing maintenance costs, there's still a bit of a grey area around that. Is it being built in the right place? Do we need another gym? These are all questions. Should the leisure centre be knocked over? They're all questions, I guess, that we're only going to find the answers to now over the next 10, 20 years. I
think so, and I think you're right that it hasn't been budgeted for correctly, because they're working on getting some money from a cafe there, from a gym, the hydrotherapy pool. Is all that going to be viable? In my opinion, no, it's not.
Am I right in thinking, Keith, I'd heard 450,000 people they're expecting to go through there annually. Is that correct or not, that figure?
Well, I heard a higher figure to justify it, but I don't know, and I don't think anyone really knows how successful it's going to be. So it'll be a 51.5-metre pool, and they'll have that split it up into two if they need to be. If you want competition, it'll be a 50-metre pool, so they push the middle section down to one end, so that gives you the 50 metres, but it'll be a 51.5-metre pool. Great for Kangaroo Flat, great for the residents, no problems about that, but I'm just so disappointed that the leisure centre has to go in the process, because, as I said, bloody minded.
Talking things council, we've had a couple of people already put their hand up and say we intend running for council here in Bendigo. The next election, I think, in October next year. And I believe you're catching up with one of them. I mean, it's started this far out, 18 months nearly. We're talking about a bumper field of candidates, I would have thought, for council next time round.
Quite interesting. We are talking to Yvonne Riddlesworth this morning, and basically that she's put a hand up, and that'll be a question I'll ask, why nearly 17 months out from the election, November next year. But I guess that if you want to get your name out there and go, seems to be that most
the
of the
way to do it,
candidates
yeah.
are for Eppalock Ward. So yeah, very interesting. Another interesting thing from last night's council meeting was the budget. Shows the people are not really interested. There was a full gallery for the pool. Once the pool was completed, the decision was made, then the budget came up for adoption. The very next item, everyone walked out. No one was interested.
Yeah. We've said that before, haven't we?
So it's really all about one-off issues like the mosque, like the pool, but no one cares about, they'll whinge about paying 6%, even though they're not paying 6%, it's 4.75% rate increase this year. But at the end of the day, not interested. So obviously they must think council's doing a good job.
They must think that, and as I said, we're probably going to see a bumper field of candidates if we already have 2 early runners.
Well, actually, there's about 4 now.
Oh, there are 4 already.
Yeah.
Hell.
So they're coming out of the woodwork already.
Oh, yeah. I don't know whether you picked up on it, Keith, but I saw an interesting report, I think it was online this morning, suggesting that in looking at cycling laws, that one of the things, not even a recommendation, but one of the thoughts that have been put forward, I think, by councils generally, and it was a think tank thing, was that motorists be always assumed to be in the wrong in any collision with a cyclist. Did you see reference to that one or not?
No, I haven't, but I've seen them talking about it, and I know councils adopted a policy as well that cyclists, they're trying to give them, not right away, but be aware of it, because Bendigo is very big on public transport, cycling paths, and trying to grow that. And I noticed Bendigo Bank with council trying to encourage people to use public transport, particularly staff at the bank, but I'm not quite sure. And my argument is, if you live out at Huntley, well, it's all very well to have bikes pass, public transport, but it's not going to be regular enough. And Strathwell say have got their own service, but that's not going to be regular enough either. So people are still going to rely on greenfield sites for subdivision to rely on their cars, which is defeating the purpose of what they're trying to achieve, I would have thought.
Yeah, I think it really annoys me when I saw reference to that, somebody silly enough to suggest that we always assume that the motorist is in the wrong. You've got a motorist paying registration and everything else that goes with driving a vehicle on the roads, insurances and all that, and to make the assumption then that that person's always in the wrong in any collision with a cyclist. The behaviour I've seen of some cyclists on the roads is absolutely ridiculous. You've got 4 abreast. And I think the other thing that really gets up my nose on cycling, and there are a lot of really good, responsible cyclists out there too, but the other thing that really gets up my nose is where the powers that be are backing a winner in saying, hey, we're going to move people onto bikes because it's healthy, it smooths traffic congestion and all the various things. It's not a solution when you've got a road and you come out with a paintbrush or a machine and run a white line down one side of the road. It's barely wide enough for a truck or a car anyway in a lot of cases, and then run a metre wide lane down there and say, well, that's your bike lane. Give me a break. You can't expect motorists to be, not everyone's drives like Fangio or whatever. You cannot do that and say, oh, we've created a bike lane. You know, it's ridiculous.
It's very difficult because you've got to, when you as a cyclist, you've got to be looking in all directions, of course, and when you're a motorist, sometimes there's a blind spot of the car and you can't see them coming up. And I had that situation the other day and happened to just see this cyclist coming up. My wife was going to get out of the car and could have easily hit that cyclist, which is what's happened. And
you're the worst in the world.
Yeah,
you're the absolute worst in the world. So I think therein lies a level of responsibility that the authorities need to take on board and say, if we're really serious about this, then we'll for example, you might have to move trees or get rid of trees, get rid of parking and have a genuine buffer zone between traffic and bikes, particularly if you want families or kids using that as an access method.
I think they're doing that in Flinders Street in Melbourne because they've knocked over all the trees, and so I'm assuming they're putting in a bike path down there as well. So pretty busy street to be riding down. I wouldn't like to be on a bike down there.
We actually watched on delay the killing fields with the Rudd thing, and it's funny.
Killing season, yeah, it was interesting, wasn't it?
Yeah, well, killing fields.
Season,
Season was it?
Yeah, that's Vietnam, the other one.
And to be honest, I was watching it last night, and of course we live only a few blocks from where you are. I said to him, well, if I didn't know it was a fire truck with a faulty siren, that were you breaking your heart down there where you are watching it. As somebody who's had a social conscience and probably a high regard for a lot of the things that have been done by Gillard, Rudd and Co. It must have broken your heart to see, we've talked about it before, the duplicity and the hypocrisy, I guess, that's so evident, I think, to a lot of people in the lives of parliamentarians. It must have broken your heart to see what goes on behind the scenes.
Well, you sort of hear these stories, but you just don't realise. I remember years and years ago.
So personal, wasn't it?
It was. Michael John was my former boss in a legal firm in Bendigo, and he went on to be a government minister in the state parliament with Jeff Kennett. And I remember talking to him. I said, "How are you going, Michael?" And he said, "Well, I'm a bit surprised," because he said the thing that you always knew who your opposition was, and at that stage he was a Liberal member. You knew who your Labor opposition was, but he said, "I didn't realise just how much opposition you have within your own party that are stabbing you in the back." And it really hit home, and that was probably going back 20 odd years ago that Michael had said that to me. So it brought it home again with the killing season that was on, because the machinations was just terrible.
And it's not only, I'm certainly not suggesting it's limited to Rudd, Gillard and Shorten and Co.
No, it was Abbott, but that's right.
Howard and Costello,
yep, for sure.
Turnbull and Abbott for that matter now. I mean, it's amazing that people get into these positions of power, and the one thing that people never control, or very rarely, is ego. It's incredible to think you're operating as Prime Minister of a country, and yet the biggest distraction can be someone else wanting your job. I mean, it's just beyond you can't comprehend that, really.
Well, I changed my mind on things because I think it showed Julia Gillard in a pretty bad light. That's my opinion. I think it showed Rudd in a good light in one sense, but then the machinations of the final one this week was just incredible to watch Alan Griffin talk about it, Greg Conbay, and they were distraught about what had happened. And then to have Tony Blair's media advisor talking about it, looking at it, for Rudd to come in. 2007 was such a majority, and then to blow all that capital in the first two terms and have zero, and then Tony Abbott wipe them out at the last election. How could they do it? And it was, as you said, egos, because one wanted to be the top and one wanted to get there quicker, and all these promises that they make, and it was horrible. And then Bill Shorten didn't come out of it too well as well.
Well, it hasn't come at a good time for him either, so no winners. I reckon Bill would have been flat out trying to convince the family to change the channel or whistle or change the subject anyway.
But did you see this morning or yesterday he came out on Neil Mitchell's program to say that he said that I'm going to support the Rudd faction, but actually voted for Julia Gillard. So he lied about that. I think if I had done that, I just would have kept quiet about it. But the fact is that that's what he was saying, because he was in Gillard's camp and then he changed sides. So he changed from supported Rudd, then he supported Gillard, and then he supposedly supported Rudd but didn't. Oh, what machinations, and it's not good for a leader to be recognising this now.
Yeah, I found it fascinating, Keith. To me, you couldn't help but look at it and think of all these, particularly in the States, they love doing anything around the White House. There's a new presidential drama coming out every 5 minutes. But rarely would you create a fictional series of drama that had the elements that thing had over the season that it's run 3 shows or something. There's nothing more fascinating than watching real people. And what always gets me with these things, and I have to hand it to the ABC with this one, they really hit it on.
Sarah Ferguson was amazing with the whole project.
She's incredible, absolutely incisive, and so very intelligent the way she approaches it. But what always gets me with these things too, and we've seen any number of them now, is the way that people that held positions of great power and authority, and in some cases still do, speak so candidly about conversations in private offices and things. I can't, you'd think you just zip and that's it, you fade away and the thing's gone, but they seem to open up and be prepared to talk about it, and that's, I think, what we find so
after the event though, that they don't talk during the time that they're in power. Like, I'm sure Malcolm Turnbull has got plenty of things to say, and he and Tony Abbott, obviously there's still things going on behind the scene there, and Turnbull's keeping his mouth and his powder quiet by not saying anything, but I'm sure there are plenty of issues, and you saw that sort of blow up with the citizenship issues a couple of weeks ago, and he's just waiting in the wings, but it'll all come out, I guess, and there's another position for Sarah Ferguson in perhaps 3 to 6 years' time when Tony Abbott's no longer in power. Malcolm Turnbull may or may not be in power, and I don't think he will be, but whoever's going to take over from Tony Abbott, and somebody will.
I was witness, I wasn't involved in, but witness to a fairly animated discussion yesterday around the Q&A drama. I mean, I know you're a fan of the program, and I don't know, well, I'll say what I think in a minute, but what do you make of it all?
Well, I just thought that Tony Jones was probably trying to create a bit of controversy because he knew that Zachy was going to be speaking, The way it sort of came across was really bad. And then all it's done is really given ammunition to Tony Abbott, because Tony Abbott knows he's on a winner with terrorism. Stop the boats. That's his mantra, and that's what he'll stay with, because the public are 80% supporting what he's doing there. But the problem with that, he's shot the messenger, that guy coming out and speaking openly. And it was interesting, Peter Cresta, who was locked up, but of course in an Egyptian jail for all that period of time, came out and said that's wrong the way that Zaki was treated, because he was speaking his mind. He's been on other programs saying he's trying to avoid and tell people, don't go to Syria, don't go to fight with IS because it's dangerous, it's wrong. That's not the way he came across. He came across as really aggressive. People got their back up, all parties did. But as Peter Cresta said, we should have freedom of speech. Sure, there's a way of doing it, but Tony Abbott is, rather than focusing on the message there, if this guy can help the government to tell people, Muslims, don't go over there and fight, that's what you should be doing. But he shot the messenger because he knows it's a populist thing to do.
He's probably a lot like me and a lot of other people too. And I think what I'd reflect on with this one, Keith, would touch on social media. And you've got people like Rupert Murdoch now tweeting, for God's sake. I mean, where he used to publish newspapers, and still does.
Nothing wrong with tweeting now, Dennis.
You're an advocate too, I know. But the point I make, I guess, is the immediacy of publishing that's available to every individual now. Everyone's basically got their own access to their own newspaper.
Well, that's what I think. I'm a publisher now with my 28,000 tweets.
Well, is it that many? But I fell victim to that because I saw what I saw, and I really took my hat off to the junior minister, the Foreign Affairs Secretary or whatever, for the way he quickly responded straight away. There was no equivocation, there was no stepping away from it. I think he really showed some strength of character to just straight away say, you are someone, bang, that I would happily see exported out of the country. But then therein lies the problem. You've seen a quick snippet like that, and you immediately have access to a way that you can publish your views on that straight away without all the facts. And I did that and said, good riddance, get rid of him. But the facts, since seem to paint a different picture. And I think that's a real worry with this whole online thing where we all, and I do it too often, I have to admit, bang, while you're full of beans, full of fire in the belly, you go straight for it.
Well, I was really, and I don't support ISIS. I don't support any of that terrible stuff that's happening overseas, that terrorism. It's just disgusting.
Yep.
But at the end of the day, the person has a point of view. We are supposed to be a democracy that we can listen to both sides of it. I was pretty appalled by his comments, but at the end of the day, when I saw a program that he was on in 2014 on the project, talking about telling people, because he was the first person to be charged with under a terrorism offence, telling people, don't go over there, it's not what you think it is. And then, so I sort of saw him in a different light, but we saw that snippet of that program the other night, and then we've got everybody, Tony Abbott, and then Malcolm Turnbull having a crack at the ABC. Of course, Tony Jones wasn't, and then Rupert Murdoch's papers yesterday would expect the disgusting comments to come out from them, which is normal from Rupert Murdoch, but he's entitled to his opinion.
Probably in tune with, I would suggest, 90% of the public.
80% of the people support that. So that's what they play to, the populist viewpoint.
Or do they reflect the populist viewpoint?
Well, they do on some occasions.
How inappropriate would it be if they took the opposite view, and we were sitting here then having the discussion saying, and you're saying to me, well, gee, it's a shame about Rupert's papers. They're always diametrically opposed to 90% of the population. You can't have your cake and eat it too.
But Rupert Murdoch has been on the same vein for a long time. And Tony Abbott supports that. And as I said, the popular stop the boats terrorism thing is a very popular thing. And you'll get probably elected on a platform like that, which Rupert Murdoch does read the tea leaves. He understands where the people want, what they want, and that's what he gives them on his front page. But it's sometimes not a balanced viewpoint. That's my only argument with it.
Well, quick one, you've mentioned a couple of things there that I'll pick up on. You've suggested Abbott might not be in power in 3 years' time or whatever. And then we're talking about election now, the impact the press can have on those outcomes. You've had Christine Milne pull the pin from the Greens this week. I must say, I look at it and I was thinking about it overnight, and I thought, gee, to me, she came across to me as dogmatic and stuck in the mud, and is seen as a party pooper and a blocker of pretty much anything that philosophically didn't reflect what their platform, so there was not, for me anyway, I didn't see compromise there. And I look at the new bloke, Di Natale, and I just think, honestly, he's already shown, I think, great strength of character and leadership qualities in saying, well, we can see value in the pensions changes that the government have put forward. Labor have blown them out of the water, again on party political lines, I would argue, whether it's good for us or not, out the door because the others come up with it. True of both sides, I believe. I take my hat off to the new bloke in the Greens though, and I think, gee, I reckon Australia needs, more than ever before, they need someone strong to lead that party, because I would argue that there's an enormous number of people out of there, Labor and Liberal voters, who are looking for an alternative vote for the next election. I think they're so disenchanted with both major parties. Milne had no hope of having much of an impact. This bloke could have a real impact on the next election.
I think part of that is correct, Dennis, because Richard Di Natale has come in. He's a breath of fresh air. Bob Brown and
big shoes to fill.
That's right. Bob Brown and Christine Milne were typical Green people. He's sort of gone middle of the road. He's almost taken a Democrats type approach to it,
true.
And will vote for things. Tony Abbott did say, I'd never accept the Greens vote. Well, of course, once you get in power, you do accept the Greens vote, as Julia Gillard did when she was elected. Basically, but he's taken middle ground. He's looking at things on a logical basis, and you're probably right that people are looking for that middle ground and middle party to go for. And if the Greens are not as extreme as what they have been with just purist policies, if we don't fit, if it doesn't fit the bill, then we don't vote for it. And that's the way Christine has been and Bob Brown was, because that was the platform that they were set up for, and I understand that.
Good timing for,
but Richard Di Natale has done a really good job, and he is pragmatic. He looks at things, what's best for the country, not how the policies will work. He might be in trouble with sort of Green voters. They might go back to, because I think...
Where are they going to go though?
Well, I think they go, pretty much the disaffected ones are really from Labor. The Liberals never really, most of their members would never have gone to the Greens, but I think they're disaffected Labor people. But under Bill Shorten's leadership, I would think that there's probably a lot of people that are still disaffected, and maybe it's not so much your first vote, it's where your second vote counts.
Well, that's if he's still leader, Bill, when it comes election, and I'd have to say I don't know that he will be. But look,
I'd agree with that too.
Yeah, while we're talking about people looking for elsewhere to go from the two major parties, I want to salute Clive Palmer. Because Clive came out this week and said something that I've said before here any number of times, and I think you agreed with me actually, Keith, for once.
Oh, that's unusual.
I tend to remember the times you agree with me. But I have said before, and old Clive said it this week, it should be limited how many terms of Parliament members serve, and I think he suggested 2 terms. 2 terms,
yeah.
And I think that is so appropriate. He made the point, the people in there that, they ride off on their, as if they're...
This is your... mantra too now. This is Tony's mantra here, coming from Dennis.
Tony's mantra?
Yeah.
I don't
Tony, he gets on it too. This has been a policy issue of yours, that they get there, they're there too long, and then they get this big bang, whiz-bang
I haven't
super.
heard Abbott say that, but I'd agree
No. Tony has his mantra with a couple of subjects.
I see.
This is one of your mantras.
Right, it is my mantra, because I think let them get in, have an impact in 2 terms. If they can't, well, they shouldn't be there anyway. Get them out. But continually injecting fresh blood and, more importantly, keeping people in touch with reality out here on the ground. Because I say again, the average punter, people in those positions up there that have been there 20, 30 years have absolutely zero idea what it's like to live out here in the real world. It's so insulated and closeted and so special, the rarefied air up there. And I had to laugh the other night. That's not enough for them, you see that. They do all that for how many years? A privileged lifestyle, totally remote from the realities of the average punter in the street, let alone Struggle Street where I'm living. But then you see on the news, it was one night, last night or the night before, they're doing something in London, and of course the High Commissioner's there. Well, who should it be? Alexander Downer. So, I mean...
Jobs for the boys, yep.
Talk about it. Give me a break. I don't know where I missed my ticket, but there's tickets being handed out when you're in your early 20s, mid-20s. And if you pick one up, you're set for life, I tell you.
Now, Dennis, do you want me to ask this question to Lisa Chester? She's on the pointy end next week. Do you want me to ask her whether she's in the real world, because she's in Canberra now?
Ask her whether she's in favour of short terms, as in a couple of terms like Big Clive.
I'll be happy to ask her that, but I know the answer will be no.
Keith, as always, a real pleasure to sit down and chew the fat with you.